At my son's wedding, they replaced my seat with a trash can. The woman at the reception table whispered apologetically as she handed me my name card. I thought she had made a mistake at first. My fingers tightened around the cream-colored envelope while the noise of the ballroom faded somewhere behind me. The card was heavy, embossed in gold script, expensive enough to match the five-star hotel Daniel and Vanessa had chosen for their wedding reception in downtown Chicago. But beneath my name, someone had written 3 extra words in silver marker. Emotional support trash can. For a moment, I simply stared at it. At 68 years old, I had learned that humiliation rarely arrives loudly. It comes quietly, elegantly, dressed in satin and flowers and champagne. I'm sure this is part of the seating joke, the young hostess said nervously. The bridal party thought it would be funny. Funny. I nodded slowly as though I understood. Around me, guests in formal wear drifted beneath crystal chandeliers carrying glasses of sparkling wine, while a string quartet played near the marble staircase. Everything looked beautiful. That was the cruel part. Humiliation always hurts more in beautiful places. I adjusted the navy blue jacket I'd spent 2 weeks tailoring for the wedding. My late husband Thomas used to say navy made my silver hair look elegant instead of old. I had almost worn black that evening, but Daniel once told me black looked too somber in family photos. Family photos. The thought stung more than I expected. Mrs. Carter, the hostess asked carefully, would you still like me to show you to your table? I smiled before she could pity me further. Of course, dear. My heels clicked softly against the ballroom floor as I followed her through rows of candlelit tables decorated with white roses and floating pearls. Guests laughed over cocktails while giant projection screens displayed engagement photos of Daniel and Vanessa smiling on beaches and rooftops and vineyards I had partially paid for without ever being invited to visit. Then I saw it. Table 1 sat directly in front of the dance floor beneath an enormous arrangement of orchids. The bridal party surrounded it in glittering gowns and tuxedos. Every chair matched perfectly except one. My chair was gone. In its place stood a polished silver trash can with a satin bow tied around the lid. Someone had taped my seating card to the front. Emotional support trash can. A few people nearby noticed me stop walking. Their conversations faltered awkwardly before quickly resuming. One bridesmaid pressed her lips together to hide a laugh. Another stared down into her champagne glass. And suddenly I understood something terrible. Everyone already knew. Not one person in that ballroom looked surprised. Oh, good. She found it. A familiar voice said brightly behind me. Vanessa. I turned slowly. My daughter-in-law looked radiant in custom ivory silk, her blonde hair pinned into a flawless low bun beneath her cathedral veil. She smiled at me the way people smile at children who are about to cry in public. Evelyn, relax, she laughed lightly, touching my arm. It's just a joke. Don't be so dramatic. Dramatic. I looked toward my son instinctively. Daniel stood beside the bar speaking with 2 groomsmen. For one hopeful second, I thought maybe he hadn't seen it yet. Then his eyes met mine across the ballroom. He saw the trash can. He saw the card. And instead of walking toward me, he looked away. That hurt more than the joke itself. Somewhere nearby, a child's voice asked loudly, Mommy, why does Grandma have to sit by the garbage? A woman quickly shushed him, but not before several guests turned to stare at me openly. Vanessa laughed under her breath. Kids notice everything, she murmured. My chest felt strangely hollow, as though the air inside me had disappeared all at once. But I refused to cry. Not there. Not in front of people who were waiting to watch me fall apart. Instead, I walked toward the trash can slowly and placed my purse beside it with careful hands. The satin ribbon brushed against my wrist. Someone in the back of the room snickered softly. Daniel still wouldn't look at me. I pulled out my chair from the neighboring table and sat down beside the silver bin while cameras flashed around the ballroom. In that moment, with wedding music floating through the air and strangers pretending not to stare, I realized something I should have understood years ago. The trash can was never the joke. I was. The wedding reception continued around me as though nothing unusual had happened. Waiters carried trays of lobster appetizers beneath glowing chandeliers, while soft jazz drifted through hidden speakers in the ceiling. Glasses clinked. People laughed too loudly. Somewhere near the dance floor, Vanessa's bridesmaids were taking photographs with disposable cameras designed to look vintage for social media. I sat beside the polished silver trash can with my hands folded neatly in my lap and tried to remember when my son had stopped seeing me as a person. Across the ballroom, Daniel smiled for photographs with Vanessa's family. Her father kept a hand proudly on Daniel's shoulder while her mother adjusted Vanessa's veil every few minutes as though she were presenting royalty to the world. They looked polished, expensive, untouchable. I remembered when Daniel used to hold my hand crossing parking lots because he was afraid I would slip on ice during Chicago winters. He could not have been older than 7. "Careful, Mom," he always said. That little boy would have been horrified by this room tonight. But that little boy no longer existed. A server approached my table carefully. "Would you like champagne, ma'am?" he asked quietly, clearly avoiding eye contact with the trash can beside me. "Thank you," I said softly. "Water is fine." My throat felt dry enough already. At the neighboring table, 2 older women whispered while pretending to study the centerpiece roses. I caught fragments. Cruel. Poor thing. Who does that at a wedding? Their pity settled over me heavier than the insult itself. I would rather people hate me than feel sorry for me. Pity turns a person invisible. I glanced down at the silver lid beside me. Someone had tied the satin bow carefully, deliberately. The joke had taken planning, time, effort. That realization sat colder inside me than anything else. Vanessa had not humiliated me impulsively. She had prepared this, and Daniel had allowed it. The music shifted as the master of ceremonies announced the bride and groom's first dance. Guests rose from their seats, smiling and applauding while spotlights dimmed around the ballroom. Daniel took Vanessa's hand and guided her onto the dance floor beneath soft golden lights. She rested her head against his shoulder while cameras flashed from every direction. They looked perfect together. That was always Vanessa's obsession. Perfection. Perfect photos. Perfect vacations. Perfect kitchen countertops no one was allowed to touch. Perfect holiday cards where everyone wore matching cream sweaters except me because she once told Daniel navy blue ruined the aesthetic. At the time, he laughed awkwardly and asked me to change clothes before the photographer arrived. I did. I always did. Slowly, memory after memory returned to me like small cuts reopening underwater. Thanksgiving dinners moved without telling me. Family trips booked after I was informed everyone assumed I would be too tired to travel. Birthday dinners where Vanessa introduced me to strangers as Daniel's sweet elderly mom, in the same tone people use for nursing home residents. Tiny humiliations. Quiet humiliations. Tonight was simply the first time they had stopped hiding them. I looked around the ballroom again and realized something else. Not one person from my side of the family had been seated near me. Vanessa had arranged the tables carefully, strategically. Her friends surrounded the dance floor, while distant relatives and older guests were pushed toward the back near the service hallway. I had spent nearly $80,000 helping pay for this wedding. My late husband's life insurance money covered the venue deposit alone. Daniel said weddings were expensive now. He promised he would never forget my generosity. Yet there I sat beside polished metal and satin ribbon while strangers avoided looking directly at me. Then, from across the room, I noticed someone staring. Olivia Parker, my niece, 24 years old, sharp-eyed, honest to a fault. Unlike everyone else in that ballroom, she was not pretending this was funny. Olivia crossed the ballroom without hesitation, weaving between tables of laughing guests and half-finished champagne glasses, until she reached me beside the silver trash can. Unlike everyone else that evening, she did not pretend this was normal. Her expression hardened the moment she saw the card taped to the metal lid. "You have got to be kidding me," she whispered. Her voice carried the kind of anger people usually try to hide at weddings. I gave her a small smile. "Apparently, it is very funny." Olivia looked around the ballroom carefully before lowering herself into the empty chair beside me. "Who did this?" she asked, although I could already tell she knew the answer. Across the dance floor, Vanessa spun beneath the lights while guests applauded her and Daniel. Everything about her looked polished down to the last pearl pinned into her hair. "Vanessa planned the seating chart," I said quietly. Olivia let out a bitter laugh under her breath. Of course she did. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The music swelled while servers carried plates of filet mignon and roasted vegetables toward nearby tables. The scent of garlic butter drifted through the room, rich and warm and expensive. It reminded me suddenly of the dinners Thomas used to cook on Sunday evenings after church. He always wore the same striped apron and insisted food tasted better when families stayed at the table longer than necessary. Back then, Dinner meant comfort. Tonight, it felt like theater. Olivia leaned closer to me. Aunt Evelyn, I heard them talking about this during the rehearsal dinner yesterday. I turned slowly toward her. Talking. She nodded once. Vanessa showed the bridesmaids a picture of the trash can on her phone. Everyone laughed except me. My chest tightened quietly. Somehow hearing that hurt more than seeing the thing itself. Daniel was there too, Olivia added carefully. He told Vanessa maybe she should not go that far, but he was smiling when he said it. I stared toward the dance floor again. Daniel rested his forehead briefly against Vanessa's, while photographers circled them like they were celebrities. The room erupted into applause as the song ended. My son smiled easily, comfortably, like a man untouched by shame. I kept thinking he would stop her, Olivia murmured. I thought maybe. He just did not realize how cruel it looked. I folded my napkin carefully across my lap. People realize more than they admit. Olivia's eyes drifted toward the silver trash can beside me. I am so sorry. There it was again. Pity. Soft. Heavy. Unavoidable. I reached for my water glass before speaking because my hands suddenly felt colder than they should have. Do you know the strange thing? I asked quietly. This is not even the worst part for me anymore. Olivia frowned slightly. Then what is? I watched Daniel laugh at something Vanessa whispered into his ear. The worst part is knowing they expected me to sit here quietly and accept it. Across the ballroom, guests began moving toward the dance floor as upbeat music replaced the slow romantic songs. Someone bumped into my chair without apologizing. Another guest dropped a cocktail napkin beside the trash can and left it there. Little things. Careless things. The kind people only do when they stop seeing someone fully. Olivia suddenly reached into her clutch purse and pulled out her phone. There is something else you should know, she said softly. Her voice had changed. Lower now. More serious. She unlocked the screen and turned it toward me beneath the tablecloth where no one else could see. On the display was a screenshot of a bridal party group chat. At the top of the conversation, Vanessa had written one sentence beside a laughing emoji. Let us see if the old woman finally understands where she belongs. For several seconds, I could not look away from the glowing screen in Olivia's hands. The group chat was filled with laughing emojis, champagne glasses, and comments that blurred together beneath the ballroom lights. One bridesmaid wrote, "This is savage." Another replied, "She will probably cry before dessert." Then Vanessa answered with a row of laughing faces followed by, "Please. She cares too much about appearances to make a scene." My fingers tightened slowly around my water glass. Not enough to shake. Not enough for anyone nearby to notice. Just enough for me to understand something inside myself was changing. Olivia locked her phone quickly and slipped it back into her purse. "I should have told you sooner," she whispered. I did not think she would actually do it. Across the room, the wedding photographer gathered guests near the floral arch for family portraits. Vanessa stood in the center, glowing beneath soft lighting while her friends adjusted her train dramatically across the polished marble floor. She looked exactly like the women featured on bridal magazines displayed at grocery store checkout lines. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, perfect smile. And somewhere underneath all that perfection lived a kind of cruelty so casual it no longer embarrassed her. "Aunt Evelyn?" Olivia asked carefully. "Are you all right?" I almost answered automatically the way women my age are trained to answer. "I am fine. It is all right. Do not worry about me." But those words suddenly felt exhausting. Instead, I looked around the ballroom slowly. Really looked. I noticed how Vanessa's family occupied the center tables closest to the dance floor, while my relatives had been scattered near the back walls beside the kitchen entrance. I noticed how the wedding slideshow displayed hundreds of photographs from trips and holidays Daniel never invited me to. In one picture, Vanessa sat on a yacht wearing sunglasses I had purchased for her birthday 2 years earlier. In another, Daniel held up wine glasses in Napa Valley while I stayed home watering their plants because they said boarding the dog was too expensive. Little pieces, tiny humiliations stitched together over years until they formed something undeniable. I think, I said quietly, that I stopped being part of Daniel's life long before tonight. Olivia looked down sadly. He changed after he met her. I thought about that carefully. People always say someone changed because it feels easier than admitting they simply revealed who they already were. Daniel used to call me every Sunday morning after church. Then it became every other week. Then birthdays only. Eventually, most conversations passed through Vanessa, first like she was screening visitors outside a private event. If I asked Daniel directly about family dinners or vacations, he usually sounded uncomfortable. Vanessa already made plans. Vanessa thought you might be tired. Vanessa wants something smaller this year. At the time, I blamed her entirely. Sitting there beside polished metal and satin ribbon, I realized my son had been handing her the scissors piece by piece while she cut me out of our family. The master of ceremonies tapped his microphone and announced dinner service. Guests returned to their tables carrying cocktails and laughter with them. A waiter placed a plate before me with roasted salmon, asparagus, and whipped potatoes arranged beautifully beneath candlelight. The silver trash can remain beside my chair like an extra guest invited specifically to mock me. Olivia glanced toward the head table and lowered her voice again. There is something else you should probably know. I looked at her carefully. She hesitated before speaking. Vanessa did not just make fun of you tonight. She made sure people would see it online too. A cold silence settled inside me. Olivia swallowed hard. There are already videos on social media from the rehearsal dinner. They were joking about whether you would notice the seating arrangement immediately or halfway through dinner. Somewhere across the ballroom, Vanessa threw her head back laughing while Daniel smiled beside her. And for the first time that evening, I stopped wondering whether they felt guilty. People who feel guilty hide their cruelty. These two had decorated theirs with flowers and candlelight. The rest of the dinner unfolded like a performance I no longer belonged to. Guests clapped through speeches, waiters refilled wine glasses, and the enormous wedding cake sat glowing beneath soft lights near the dance floor, while cameras followed Vanessa everywhere she moved. I barely touched my food. The salmon cooled beneath the ballroom lights while conversations drifted around me in fragments. Stocks, vacation homes, ski trips in Aspen, everything expensive, everything polished. Every now and then, someone glanced toward the silver trash can beside me before quickly pretending they had not. Olivia stayed close for most of dinner, though I noticed several bridesmaids glaring at her from across the room. Loyalty has become rare these days. Most people choose comfort over honesty when the room gets uncomfortable. Olivia still chose honesty. Halfway through dessert service, she leaned closer again. There is someone you should talk to before you leave tonight, she whispered carefully. Who? The wedding coordinator. Her name is Melissa. She looked sick when she saw the seating arrangement earlier. I followed Olivia's gaze toward a woman in a black suit standing near the ballroom entrance with an electronic tablet pressed against her chest. Melissa looked exhausted in the way only wedding staff can look after 12 hours of smiling through other people's chaos. But every few minutes, her eyes drifted toward my table with visible discomfort. Why would she talk to me? I asked quietly. Olivia hesitated. Because she argued with Vanessa about the trash can yesterday. Something inside me sharpened slightly. Not anger. Not yet. Clarity. Across the ballroom, Daniel tapped his champagne glass gently before standing for his speech. The room quieted instantly. I just want to thank everyone who made tonight possible. He began with an easy smile. Vanessa reached for his hand while guests watched admiringly. Especially our families. We could not have done any of this without your love and support. Several people turned toward me politely at the mention of family. I smiled back automatically because women my age learn early how to survive embarrassment gracefully. Daniel continued speaking about loyalty, kindness, and building a future together. Every word sounded polished enough to belong inside a greeting card. I wondered whether he heard himself anymore when he spoke, or whether people who lie long enough eventually stop recognizing truth entirely. Then came the line that finally hollowed something out inside me. Vanessa taught me what real family looks like, he said warmly. Applause filled the ballroom immediately. Vanessa blinked back theatrical tears while her parents beamed proudly from the head table. I sat perfectly still beside polished metal and satin ribbon while those words settled over me like snow. Thomas and I spent 36 years building a life around our son. We worked double shifts when money was tight. We missed vacations to pay private school tuition. Thomas once sold his prized vintage Mustang because Daniel wanted to attend a summer law program in Washington. Real family. I lowered my eyes slowly to the untouched dessert plate before me. Lemon cake with raspberry filling. Daniel's favorite flavor since childhood. Suddenly Melissa appeared beside my chair. Mrs. Carter, she said softly, her voice almost lost beneath the music. Would it be all right if I spoke with you privately for just a moment? Olivia straightened immediately. Melissa glanced nervously toward the head table before speaking again. There are some things I think you deserve to know. I followed her into the quieter hallway outside the ballroom, where hotel staff pushed silver catering carts across patterned carpet. The distant sound of music echoed through closed doors behind us. Melissa exhaled shakily before handing me her phone. I should not be showing you this, she admitted. But after tonight, I cannot keep pretending this was harmless. On the screen was an invoice breakdown for the wedding. My eyes moved slowly down the numbers. Venue deposit, floral arrangements, live band, photography package. Attached beside nearly every major payment line was one name. Mine. Melissa looked at me carefully. Mrs. Carter, you paid for almost 70% of this wedding. For a moment, all I could hear was the muffled laughter leaking through the ballroom doors behind us. Then Melissa quietly added the one sentence I think she had been holding back all evening. And Vanessa referred to you as the family retirement account during planning meetings. Melissa stood quietly beside me in the hotel hallway while catering staff moved around us carrying trays of empty champagne glasses and stacked dinner plates. The ballroom doors opened and closed every few seconds, spilling bursts of laughter and music into the corridor before shutting again. I stared at the invoice breakdown on her phone much longer than I needed to. The numbers were impossible to misunderstand. $42,000 for the venue deposit, $12,000 for floral installations, $9,000 for the live band Vanessa insisted was essential for the atmosphere. Again and again, my name appeared beside the payments like a signature carved into stone. Mine, mine, mine. Daniel told me the two of them were contributing equally, I said finally. My own voice sounded strangely distant to me. Melissa lowered her eyes carefully. I do not think they expected you to ever see the actual contracts. I handed the phone back slowly. My fingertips felt cold despite the warmth of the hallway lights. How long have they been joking about me? Melissa hesitated before answering. Since the planning meetings started 6 months ago. Something inside me became very still after she said that. Not shattered. Not broken. Still, there is a difference. People think betrayal arrives like thunder. In reality, it often arrives quietly, after years of tiny warnings you ignored because love made you hopeful. I remembered every check I had written for this wedding, every transfer from my retirement savings. Daniel always sounded embarrassed asking for help at first. It is just temporary, Mom. We are over budget. Vanessa really wants this to be special. I said yes every time because mothers are trained to confuse sacrifice with love. Melissa glanced nervously toward the ballroom entrance again before speaking in a lower voice. Mrs. Carter, there is something else. I looked at her without speaking. The rehearsal dinner videos were Vanessa's idea too. She asked the bridal party to record your reaction tonight, if possible. For one brief second, I closed my eyes. Not because I felt weak, because suddenly I understood the full shape of what they had planned. The trash can was not spontaneous cruelty. It was content, entertainment, something to upload later with captions and music while strangers online laughed at an elderly woman being humiliated at her own son's wedding. When I opened my eyes again, Melissa looked almost relieved by how calm I remained. I am sorry, she whispered. You seem like a very kind person. Kind. Another word women like me hear often right before someone takes advantage of us. I thanked her quietly and walked back toward the ballroom alone. The music grew louder with every step until the doors opened again and warmth, light, and applause swallowed me whole. Nobody noticed my absence immediately. Daniel and Vanessa were cutting the wedding cake beneath sparkling lights while guests crowded around holding up phones. Vanessa laughed as Daniel smeared a tiny amount of frosting against her cheek for the cameras. Everything looked curated, designed. Even their affection seemed rehearsed for social media. I returned to my seat beside the silver trash can without drawing attention to myself. Olivia watched me carefully from across the table. What happened? She mouthed silently. I gave the smallest shake of my head. Not now. She understood immediately. Around us, guests clapped while servers passed slices of lemon raspberry cake onto delicate white plates. Daniel caught sight of me briefly during the celebration. For the first time all evening, something uncomfortable flickered across his face. Guilt perhaps, or fear. It disappeared quickly once Vanessa leaned against him smiling for another photograph. I looked down at my purse resting beside the trash can. Inside was the leather checkbook Thomas bought me on our 25th anniversary. Brown Italian leather. My initials pressed carefully into the corner in gold. Thomas used to joke that I handled money better than any banker he had ever met. "You always notice things other people miss," he once told me. I had forgotten that about myself for a long time. Tonight reminded me. Slowly, I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone beneath the tablecloth where nobody could see. Then I opened my banking application for the first time that evening. And quietly, while laughter echoed through the ballroom around me, I began reading every financial account connected to Daniel Carter's future. The wedding ended close to midnight beneath golden hotel lights and exhausted laughter. Guests drifted toward elevators carrying floral centerpieces and half-finished drinks, while valet attendants lined expensive cars along the curb outside the hotel entrance. Vanessa stood near the revolving doors hugging friends dramatically for photographs, still glowing beneath professional makeup untouched by the evening. Daniel remained beside her with one hand resting against the small of her back like he was afraid she might disappear if he let go for even a second. Neither of them stopped me as I left. That detail stayed with me during the drive home more than the trash can itself. My son watched his 68-year-old mother walk alone through a downtown Chicago parking garage after midnight, wearing heels and carrying humiliation like an invisible coat, and he did not once ask if I made it safely to my car. The city lights blurred softly against my windshield as rain began falling over the freeway. By the time I reached my house in Oak Brook, the streets were nearly empty. I sat inside my parked car for several minutes listening to the ticking sound of the cooling engine while porch lights glowed warmly across quiet suburban lawns. My house suddenly felt larger than usual. Quieter, too. Thomas had been gone for 6 years, but that night was the first time I truly understood what loneliness sounded like. It sounded like nobody calling after a wedding to make sure you got home safely. Inside, I placed my purse carefully on the kitchen counter and removed my earrings one at a time beneath the soft yellow light over the sink. My reflection in the dark window startled me slightly. I looked older than I had that morning. Not weaker, just older. Tired in a way sleep does not fix. The navy jacket still smelled faintly like hotel perfume and candle smoke. I folded it neatly over a chair before walking toward Thomas's office at the back of the house. Most of the room remained untouched since his death. Leather chair, wooden shelves, framed photographs from vacations and anniversaries. The old brass desk lamp, he insisted, gave better light than modern bulbs. I turned it on slowly and sat down at the desk with my phone beside me. Then I began reviewing every account connected to Daniel. Over the years, helping him had become automatic. College tuition, law school loans, down payment assistance for the condo downtown. A business investment account I quietly guaranteed 3 years earlier when his firm struggled during a merger. Even the luxury SUV Vanessa drove leased under. A financial umbrella partially secured through one of my retirement accounts. Piece by piece, I traced the shape of their entire life. And piece by piece, I realized something deeply uncomfortable. They had built their future assuming my support would never end. Not because they respected me, because they believed I would always tolerate disrespect in exchange for staying close to my son. My phone buzzed suddenly across the desk. Daniel. For one foolish second, hope rose inside me before I answered. Mom, he said quickly over background noise and laughter. Hey, we just got back to the hotel suite. Did you make it home all right? There it was. The performance. Late. Careless. Obligatory. Yes, I answered calmly. I made it home. He exhaled with visible relief, already eager to move past discomfort. Good. Listen, Vanessa feels bad that you got upset earlier. Upset. Not humiliated. Not degraded. Upset. It was just a wedding joke, he continued carefully. You know how her friends are. I looked down at the open financial statements spread across Thomas's desk. Numbers. Accounts. Guarantees. Leverage. Do I asked quietly. Silence stretched briefly between us. Then Daniel sighed the same exhausted sigh he used as a teenager whenever I questioned him about anything inconvenient. Mom, please do not make this into something bigger than it was. Bigger. As though cruelty only counts if the victim reacts loudly enough. I leaned back slowly in Thomas's leather chair. Daniel, I said softly, how much do you currently have left in your business account? The silence on the other end changed instantly. Sharper now. Alert. Why? He asked carefully. I was simply curious. Another pause. Around 12,000, I think. What? $12,000. That was all. After the honeymoon flights, luxury condo payments, wedding debt, and the lifestyle Vanessa carefully displayed online, my son and his new wife were balancing their entire future on financial support they assumed would never disappear. I closed the folder in front of me gently. No reason, I answered calmly. I was just reviewing my finances tonight. For the first time during the conversation, Daniel sounded uneasy. 3 days later, Daniel and Vanessa left for their honeymoon in Santorini, believing their lives had officially begun. Vanessa posted airport photographs before sunrise wearing white cashmere and oversized sunglasses with captions about new beginnings and marrying your best friend. Thousands of strangers online congratulated them beneath photographs I partially paid for. I did not respond to any of it. Instead, I spent those 3 days quietly reorganizing my own life. On Monday morning, I met with my attorney, Richard Levinson, in his downtown office overlooking the Chicago River. Richard had handled Thomas's estate years earlier and knew exactly how much financial support I had provided Daniel over time. He listened without interrupting while I explained the wedding, the trash can, the videos, the group messages, and the phone call afterward. When I finished speaking, Richard removed his glasses slowly and folded his hands together. "Evelyn," he said carefully, "are you asking me whether you legally have the right to remove your financial backing?" "No," I answered calmly. "I am asking how quickly it can be done." The room fell silent except for distant traffic outside the windows. Richard studied me closely for several seconds before nodding once. "Very quickly." And so it began. The condo guarantee attached to Daniel's mortgage was withdrawn first, then the secondary business protection account. The luxury vehicle lease connected through my retirement portfolio followed immediately after. Richard moved carefully, legally, methodically. No screaming, no threats, no revenge speeches. Just signatures. Quiet signatures. By Thursday afternoon, nearly every financial safety net supporting Daniel and Vanessa's lifestyle had disappeared. That evening, I sat alone on my back patio wrapped in a light sweater while summer rain moved softly through the trees behind my property. My phone buzzed just after 8 o'clock. "Daniel." I let it ring twice before answering. "Mom," he said sharply, his voice tight with confusion. "What is going on with the condo account?" I took a slow sip of tea before answering. "I am reviewing my retirement finances. The bank called me this afternoon saying the guarantor status changed." His breathing sounded uneven now. Frustrated. Nervous. In the background, I could hear waves and distant music from what was probably a beachside restaurant in Greece. Vanessa laughed faintly somewhere behind him before asking, "What did she say?" He muted the phone briefly. I waited quietly. When he returned, his tone had changed completely. Softer now. Careful. "Mom, if this is about the wedding, I already told you Vanessa feels bad." "Feels bad." Not sorry enough to call me herself, apparently. "Daniel," I asked gently, "did she remove the videos?" Silence answered me first. Then came the defensive sigh I knew so well. They were harmless jokes. Harmless to whom? Another silence. Longer this time. Rain tapped softly against the patio railing beside me, while somewhere far away my son stood on a Greek island realizing the foundation beneath his new marriage was less stable than he thought. "Mom," he said finally, "we are trying to enjoy our honeymoon." I looked out toward the dark backyard where Thomas once built a wooden swing for Daniel when he was 8 years old. My son used to beg for one more push before bedtime every summer evening. "And I spent years trying to enjoy being your mother," I answered quietly. He inhaled sharply like the words caught him off guard. Before he could respond, another call appeared on my screen. "Richard." "Daniel," I said calmly, "I should take this." Then I ended the conversation before he could stop me. Richard's voice sounded professional, as always when I answered. "The business account changes processed successfully," he informed me. "However, there is one thing you should probably know." I sat up slightly straighter. "What is it?" "Daniel attempted to access additional emergency credit this afternoon after the guarantor removal notice was issued." I closed my eyes briefly. "Was he approved?" Richard paused. "No." The rain continued falling softly around my patio, while distant thunder rolled across the dark Chicago sky. Somewhere in Santorini, my son and his wife were probably staring at declined transaction notices and frozen financial alerts for the first time in their marriage. Not because I wanted to destroy them, because for the first time in years, I had stopped protecting people who enjoyed humiliating me. My phone buzzed again almost instantly after the call ended. This time it was Vanessa. Vanessa called me 6 times that night, before finally leaving a voicemail just after midnight. I listened to it the next morning while standing in my kitchen beside the coffee maker Thomas bought me 20 years earlier. Her voice sounded strained beneath forced politeness. Evelyn, I think there has been some kind of misunderstanding with the financial accounts. Daniel is really stressed, and honestly, this is affecting our honeymoon in a major way. Please call us back as soon as you can. Not once during the message did she apologize for the wedding. Not once did she mention the trash can, the videos, or the humiliation. To Vanessa, the real tragedy was inconvenience. I deleted the voicemail and poured myself coffee slowly while sunlight spilled across the hardwood floor. For the first time in years, the silence inside my home no longer felt lonely. It felt peaceful. Daniel called again later that afternoon. This time I answered. "Mom," he said immediately, exhaustion heavy in his voice. "The condo management office contacted us this morning." I remained quiet. "Without your guarantor status, they are reassessing the financing terms." In the background, I could hear waves crashing softly and distant voices speaking Greek. Their honeymoon paradise sounded less glamorous now. "I understand," I replied calmly. "Mom, come on," he snapped suddenly. "You are making this into a punishment." "Punishment?" The words settled between us quietly. "No, Daniel," I answered. "I am making it into a boundary." Silence followed. I imagined him standing somewhere beside white stone buildings and blue ocean water, trying to understand why the woman he dismissed so easily was no longer behaving predictably. "Vanessa is really upset," he muttered finally. I almost laughed at that. Vanessa was upset now. Not when strangers laughed at me. Not when children pointed toward the trash can. Not when videos were uploaded online for entertainment. Only now, when luxury became unstable. "Do you know what upset me?" I asked softly, watching my son look away while people humiliated me publicly. He inhaled sharply, but said nothing. "I spent years believing love meant accepting disrespect quietly because I was afraid of losing you," I continued. "But I lost you long before that wedding." The line remained silent except for distant ocean wind. Then Daniel spoke so quietly I barely recognized his voice. "I did not think it would hurt you that much." There it was. The truth. Not remorse. Not empathy. Just shock that I turned out to be human after all. "That is because both of you stopped seeing me as a person," I said calmly. Another long silence followed before he asked the question I think mattered most to him. "Are you going to restore the accounts?" I looked out my kitchen window toward the backyard where Thomas planted maple trees decades earlier. Their leaves moved gently in the summer breeze. Steady, unhurried, alive without asking permission. "No," I answered. Daniel exhaled shakily. Somewhere behind him, Vanessa began speaking rapidly in the background, her voice rising with panic. He muted the phone briefly before returning. "You are really willing to destroy our future over a joke?" I closed my eyes for a moment. "No, Daniel," I said softly. "You destroyed your future the moment you confused my kindness with weakness." After the call ended, weeks passed quietly. The videos from the wedding disappeared from social media first. Then came the apology emails. Vanessa's arrived before Daniel's. Long paragraphs about stress, pressure, wedding anxiety, and misunderstandings. Not once did she fully admit cruelty. People like Vanessa rarely do. Admitting cruelty requires recognizing other people as equal human beings. Daniel's message was shorter, simpler. He wrote that he missed me. I stared at those words for a very long time before closing my laptop without replying. Autumn arrived slowly in Oakbrook that year. The maple trees behind my house turned gold and crimson while cold wind moved through the neighborhood each evening. One Sunday afternoon, Olivia visited for tea and helped me pack old photographs into storage boxes upstairs. At one point, she paused beside the hallway window and smiled gently at me. "You seem different lately," she said. "Better different." I thought about that while wrapping a framed wedding photo of Thomas and me in tissue paper. In the picture, I was 26 years old, laughing beside a man who never once made me beg for dignity. I spent too much of my life trying to earn a seat at tables where people secretly wanted me gone, I said quietly. Then I placed the photograph carefully into the box and closed the lid. Now I would rather sit alone than beside people who treat me like garbage. Outside, leaves drifted slowly across the lawn beneath the pale October sky, while the house remained warm and peaceful around me. And for the first time in years, I no longer felt afraid of being excluded. Because once someone survives humiliation publicly, silence no longer feels like punishment. Sometimes it feels like freedom.